Welcome to Mental Health Matters, a podcast of KU Leuven Healthy. With this podcast, we will share inspiring stories to keep young researchers in a good mental shape. I'm Pieter-Jan, PJ, and this is Robyn.
Hello.
We are both two young researchers at the KU Leuven and we will host this podcast.
In each episode, we will talk with a PhD student or a postdoc of the KU Leuven about their health and well-being. Through the different episodes, we will try to find answers on different questions like how do you stay confident and resilient in a highly competitive world?
How do you deal with stress, isolation or anxiety?
How do you create a good work-life balance?
And how do you stay motivated during your research process? Find out the answers together with us and get inspired. Discover the advice of different experts of KU Leuven on the broad range of topics. And at the end of each episode, Robyn and I try out an exercise or some advice under guidance of our guests.
So let's discover new habits to stay healthy and in a good mental shape. Hi PJ.
Hi Robyn, it's good to be back in the studio.
Yeah, I think so too. And today we have a new guest, Giovanna, and she will talk to us a little bit more about imposter feelings. Do you know what that is?
Definitely, yes. It's like you feel you are not on the right spot in the right time, like you're faking your knowledge and you're just not really feeling competent at your job. It was really a relief when I heard it for the first time that it was a real thing, the imposter syndrome.
It's something a lot of PhD students can relate to, and specifically Giovanna, our guest of today. So let's invite her to the studio.
So hi Giovanna,
Hi.
Welcome. We start each episode with some dilemmas, so you can just answer the first thing that comes up in your mind.
Ready.
Okay, let's begin. Are you an evening or morning person?
Morning person.
Oh,
If I want to be productive, I like to wake up early because after a certain hour at night, I usually just...
what's early for you?
Well, depends on what I have to do, but I also don't mind getting up around 6:30 or 6 even.
Okay.
But after 10 p.m., I'm just... I get very sleepy, whatever I'm doing.
What do you prefer, staying at a hotel or going out camping?
Well, that's a very difficult question because I probably like both. I love camping. I've been a scout for over 10 years. But at the same time, I don't mind a nice hotel once in a while just to relax.
I can understand. Like a good balance between both.
Exactly.
To stay on the topic of vacation and holidays, do you prefer visiting things or would you rather relax and do nothing?
I do think visiting things because after a while of doing nothing, I get frustrated. But also maybe a combination of both is also nice.
Hi, Giovanna, also from my side. It's lovely to meet you. What is your research on exactly?
I'm a postdoc at the Materials Engineering Department, and my research focuses on sustainability, circular economy, and in particular the environmental impact assessment of waste management processes or new technologies.
Okay, very interesting. And can you tell something more about yourself?
I come from Italy, from Rome, and I moved here more than 5 years ago now, and I currently live in Brussels. I'm 30. I love dancing salsa.
That's interesting. We'll have a salsa break at the end. So Giovanna, we have been talking about what it feels like when you feel like an imposter and you're scared someone is going to find out. So how does it feel like for you though?
Well, I think generally the main traits of feeling these imposter syndromes is the feeling that you're not good enough for what you're doing, that you don't deserve to be there. And so the constant doubt about yourself and your skills, and that maybe you're there in that position because of luck or because someone misinterpreted your skills. You always have this constant fear that someone will find out eventually. So also this thing of being judged by others and them finding out that maybe you're not what they thought you were. So this, I think, is the general feeling I have about the imposter syndrome and that I experienced it. But I think how I experienced it is also very intensely and very extreme. At the beginning, it wasn't that extreme. So I think it started around when I started my PhD. You feel that you have more responsibility than during your master's and bachelor. No, you're contributing to research that others will study and use. So you feel like you have to give your input and that you will also be judged on those. And that then starts bringing up those feelings that you don't deserve to be there or maybe you're not good enough to fulfill that role. But then during my PhD, it didn't come up that much because, I don't know, maybe you realize the PhD is a learning experiences and you take it for what it is. You enjoy the experiences. I had the chance to participate to conferences, get feedback from a lot of colleagues, and I think really helped to understand the benefits also of the PhD. But then when I reached the final part of my PhD there, it's when it really escalated for me. And what I mean is that I reached the moment when I had to write my PhD thesis. So I had to really deliver and really look back to what I had done the previous 4 years and put everything down. And I knew I would be judged. Then it's when really all my self-doubt really started to emerge, to the level that I started doubting of everything I had done until that moment. I really started being afraid to look back at the work I was doing or I had done, afraid to find mistakes, to find that the work wasn't enough to deliver, and all these feelings. And that is when I started having some anxiety attacks. So at the beginning, they were quite sporadic. So once in a while, I used to have these anxiety attacks. But then the more I went towards my preliminary defense, so towards my end of the thesis, the more this anxiety increased, to the level where I really started waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep or eat, and really reaching a level where my anxiety was so high and constant that it almost felt like it was a numbing feeling, that I couldn't think of anything else other than this fear, this anxiety, and this... and I really couldn't focus or anything. And so this is why I talk about that it really went to the extreme, and that is why it also...
It really affected your daily functioning.
Absolutely, yeah. I wasn't really able to focus or work. I remember I used to cry a lot during the day. And of course, it just feeds in the loop, because the more you can do things, the more you feel you can't do it, the more you doubt yourself and your abilities, and the more...
Were you able to talk with somebody about it?
So yeah, when I started really these high levels, I started the process with a therapist. I'm Italian, so for me it was easier to contact one online to speak the same language.
An Italian one or?
An Italian one,
okay, yeah.
So it was from Italy. We would have these sessions online, and that surely helped a bit. I also combined this with some medicine, because at a certain moment also my therapist suggested me to talk to a psychiatrist, because to try to lower down a bit the level of this anxiety, because it was so numbing and so overwhelming that I couldn't think lucidly. And at this stage, there's not much you can actually do, or so just to try to lower down. And so that's a bit the process I went through. And this kept on going, I think, a bit both also between my preliminary and public defense. And then I slowly started to calm down, but it's been quite a process.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what exactly was then the tipping point to go to therapy?
Yeah, well, it was also from suggestion from both my family and also my supervisor, who supported me a lot in this.
So you talked to your supervisor about it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that was one of the best things that helped me during this process. It was his really daily support and understanding. And he also really understood the problem that there was and really tried to help me through it. I remember really he was able to say always the right thing at the right moment to try to ease my my anxiety, but also to address the doubts and fears I had in relation to my progress and to the thesis and everything. And yeah, that helped me a lot. He also arrived to tell me to just remember to breathe to reach in a proper state my preliminary defense. So it was very nice. I always remember this very as a fun moment now, but indeed it was a good advice.
And were you nervous to talk about this with your supervisor, or did it go fluently?
Well, at the beginning, I hesitated, yes, to talk about it a bit because, mental health is always considered a bit a taboo, and then I'm also a very proud person. So, showing your most vulnerable part, and also, it's also your boss. So showing that maybe it's also feeds in a bit, your imposter syndrome. It's like showing that maybe you're not good enough for this.
Yeah, and they will react
That they will react the way you think they could react, and that feeds in this anxiety. But then it was the whole opposite, and it couldn't have been a better decision, or it couldn't have been a better reaction from his part.
And did you have colleagues as well? Do you think it's a problem that more PhD students and postdocs experience, that feeling of being an imposter?
I think yes. So I did talk in the final parts of this. I did open up and talk to a lot of colleagues, both here in KU Leuven, but also in other universities, as I worked also, for example, in Sweden. And I have to say that I heard a lot of people experiencing this, but I also have to say that the level and intensity of experiencing imposter syndrome depends, I think, on different factors. And in my case, I think it really depends on my personality, for one hand. And on the other hand, also a bit the situation around me in that period. So when I talk about my personality, I'm quite an insecure person. And also I'm what my therapist defined as a highly sensitive person. And this means that I feel things very deeply, but I also tend to overthink things. And overthink means that I play scenarios in my mind for very long, even after things have passed, or like what if scenarios are the norm. And then I'm very overcritical towards myself, self-critical, yes. And on the other hand, it was during the COVID pandemic, which meant that I was home the whole time. So we were all in isolation. And I didn't have that feedback probably that I needed from colleagues, from peers, that could have probably maybe helped a bit ease this situation. While being alone at home, me, an overthinker and very overcritical, I started just thinking in loops about all these things, and when you keep them in your mind, they just get bigger.
But I think it's a very recognizable story about feeling the imposter. I don't know, Robyn, if you had the same feelings.
Yeah, I think it's very common when doing a PhD, and like you say, it comes in different levels, because I am also a big overthinker, which can be good because you can think before acting, but if you constantly think about things, it's also very tiring because it never stops. And I think this is a part of doing a PhD, because of course, if you want to do research, you have to compare with what already has been done, like methods or findings other researchers have found in their research. And then you have to compare yourself. And this is a moment where I started reading these texts. I thought, oh my God, they are so good, and I am never going to be this good. But these are these thoughts you have in your head, and they are not necessarily true.
Yeah, it's the same. The expectations you have from being a PhD student or researcher, for me, was as well very overwhelming, because you start and all of a sudden you are supposed to be the expert in something, while I feel like I have no clue what I'm doing, or I don't even know how to measure this part, or I have to figure out so much stuff, and you are afraid that you already should know it. That's for me, my first year as well already was very overwhelming, to realize that I felt like an imposter, basically. But I didn't know that the imposter syndrome was real until we had an information session above our doctoral school who said like, hey, there is an imposter syndrome. And yeah, they had a very beautiful scheme about how you create those thoughts yourself by saying like, now I'm lucky because I've published a paper, but it was just luck. It was not my own work, my own effort. It was just, yeah, I was lucky with this. And then when something goes wrong, then you internalize it. So that was very interesting for me to realize what it is and what causes it. So very glad to hear you talk about it. And also, indeed, there are different stages. I'm not in the anxiety stage yet. I hope I won't end up there.
You now say I'm not in that stage yet, which is very good, of course. But would you have some tips for people like who are acknowledging these feelings, how to tackle them or to avoid getting into the stage of these anxiety attacks?
Well, I think what helped me the most in this journey, let's say, was for sure open communication about it. Talking to others, realizing you're not alone in this, for me was a big part of my understanding of the issue and also of addressing it. And then, of course, if you reach a level where you need to really talk about it, I really would suggest to seek professional help. And because this really helps you in the journey of understanding where this comes from, what is the triggers, your anxiety, what is it in your journey but also in your life that can trigger this for you, why you feel this way, and understanding also of your personality, which will just make you stronger in the process. And of course, I was very lucky to have a supervisor that supported me, and I really hope that other people can be as lucky as I am. But I also think that sharing it with a supervisor, hoping he or she may be as understanding, is also a big part, because to have an internal person that can understand
take away the pressure,
pressure, or at least show you what the reality is, because it's also part of understanding what the reality is. You feel like you're not able to see what is real and what is not. Once you get in a state of really high anxiety, you lose track of reality. You lose. So I think this is also very important.
Can you maybe describe what a specific anxiety attack looked like?
Well, the anxiety attacks, when they were still sporadic, it was more like I started feeling this an increased heartbeat, and then I started sweating cold, like when you're sick, and really trembling, and I think these were the main symptoms. But also I couldn't focus, and then when they became stronger and also more constant, I started I couldn't sleep anymore. I started with a lack of sleep. I couldn't eat, and it was really hard to focus on anything else. So I used a lot, also workout a lot, just to keep my mind off it. But it wasn't a very healthy period, so I did lose a lot of weight because a lot of workout and not eating. But that wasn't the healthy way of doing it, that for sure.
You mentioned it's a bad thing that you still have the imposter syndrome or feelings. I would like to challenge you and say something positive about it. What is good of overthinking or overanalyzing? Did it get you to places you maybe never would experience? Or is there some positive side of this story?
Well, in general, as what was mentioned also earlier, I think overthinking also has its benefits. I have to say, I see it both in my professional and personal life, the ability to understand the different perspectives. It also makes you understand people's positions and needs a bit better. And this helps in both personal and professional relationships. And I think it also brings me to be very empathetic and so work well with other people. Specific to that journey, I'm not sure about that. But indeed, it brought me to review a lot of my work and find new maybe paths for my research. But I wouldn't go back to that probably.
We have mentioned the tipping points. How can we avoid it? So how can we tackle those first feelings of being an imposter? Do you have some advice for maybe PhD students who are listening now and say like, oh yeah, I totally recognize myself in this? Or as well supervisors who maybe want to avoid that their PhD students miss out the opportunity to tackle it when it first arises?
Well, one thing is really to talk about it as soon as possible and not be afraid of doing so, and also not being afraid to or feel guilty about it or be afraid of being a failure just because you're feeling that way. And this is something that I lived a lot, and that is why I also delayed talking about it with the colleagues, supervisor, therapist. Now, you always have the impression that what you're feeling is minor. It's a minor problem, no? And okay, it was for me during the COVID pandemic with its tragic consequences, and I started having these feelings, and for me, I really felt that I didn't have the right to feel that way. I'm a very lucky person. I had a job, I was healthy, a roof on my head, and people that loved me. And so you really have that thing that, why should I talk about this when there's so much going on? You tend to minimize what you're living. But then this is actually what brought me then to overthink everything on my own and to escalate to the anxiety that I had. And one other thing, actually, it's an anecdote from my therapy that I really want to share. For this imposter syndrome, you always feel like you're not good enough and you don't have the right to be there. And then that you sort of challenge the system, no? Because they haven't really realized that yet of me. And then my therapist told me, you cannot be at the same time completely incompetent and so competent to fool the system of very competent people like professors and all the scientific community. So it's a bit of feeling between being super incompetent and a feeling of omnipotence, that you're better than everyone else. So it's really like, keep it real. It's you cannot be both things. So this already brings you to think that maybe you should trust the people that believe in you, in your skills, and that maybe they're not that wrong about you.
So yeah, get out of your head, speak up. And I think we can also celebrate the little accomplishments and don't say like, oh, I was lucky, but really stand still, take a moment to appreciate
acknowledge
your work.
that you just did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and in every episode we also listen to a quote of an expert we talk to, and today we're actually going to listen to a quote of Professor Bram Vervliet of the KU Leuven, and he is actually an expert on anxiety, so let's listen what he has to say about this.
Are fears always justified? No. Oftentimes, fears are misaligned and focus on things that pose no real danger to us. If you keep imagining increasingly vivid disaster scenarios, your anxiety will rise because you begin to believe that those scenarios are actually going to happen. But with every detail you add to a disaster scenario, it actually becomes less likely. But it doesn't feel that way. With each new detail, the scenario seems to become more inevitable. That's why it's important to recognize that feeling anxious doesn't automatically mean you're actually in danger. What fear does make you clear is that something important is at stake for you, something valuable. If certain things weren't important to you, they wouldn't generate fear. So don't take your fears literally, but do take them seriously. They show you what you find important in life.
Does it speak to you?
Absolutely. I find a lot of things that we've talked about and also that I've experienced. It talks about the overthinking, no, adding detail to the scenarios in your mind, and that's exactly what my overthinking feels like. And in isolation, this just increased, no. And actually, the term fear as well, it's something that also my therapist also always give me as an example, the fact that the anxiety is generated by the fear of a danger, and that this danger for me was the fear of failure and all the fears and the doubts that I accumulated in my mind. And that then you realize what actually analyzing this, what it's all about.
Yeah, I can totally relate, specifically with these disaster scenarios. Mostly I think of 100 ways about how something can go wrong, but not one way how it might turn out well. So constantly just ruminating about this might go wrong, this, and I can imagine specifically with doing the PhD, a very big project you're working on, then it's inevitable that you think about things that can go wrong. So it's hard to not get caught up in this overthinking. But I do like about the quote that it ends with, it also shows the thing what is important for you in life. And I haven't thought about it
that
in
speaks to
this
me as
way.
well.
Yeah.
That your fear is actually showing what you care
Yeah.
about.
What you're invested in. Yeah.
If you didn't care about it, you wouldn't think about it. So yeah, that's something very eye-opening, I think, also.
Yeah, indeed. And for me, it also helped, I think, to understand that my PhD, for me, while it was very important, it couldn't be everything for me. I lost the perception that there was something else other than the PhD in my life. And mostly at the end, with all this anxiety, it really took over. That was all I could think about. And while overcoming it and thinking about it, I think you realize that you have to take a step back and really put things into perspective, give priorities to your life, so that this can also help you to weigh a bit differently all the things that happen, being the triggers that trigger your anxiety during your PhD, or be it other things that happened outside of the academic context, let's say.
You're still in academia and research today. Do you still have trouble with these feelings, or is it way better now?
Well, the imposter syndrome is still there. This is the bad news. I didn't overcome it completely. But the good thing is that indeed, with this process, I learned to identify the symptoms of these anxiety attacks, which also gives me the time to breathe and try to ease them before they become too strong for me. And also to understand what is it that triggers these anxiety attacks. So at the beginning, it was everything that was related to my PhD would trigger them. And I remember that for 6 months after my defense, I couldn't open any of my papers or thesis. Like that was a taboo for me. But now it's getting better. So I can open them, I can read them. And it's also easier to address these. So triggers are less, let's say.
And do you have a specific example of what you would do if there is something that triggers you, something you would think of, or?
Well, if something that triggers, I usually tend to distract myself and tend to maybe breathe a bit more deeply, and maybe look for something that can actually make me see the reality of things, and maybe go back to that a bit later. Or also talk about it with some colleagues. It really happens sometimes that I might doubt myself, that maybe what I did was wrong. It happened recently. I submitted an abstract for a conference, and then it was already accepted and everything. And then I started doubting that what I had written was completely wrong. And then I talked to my colleagues, and they were like, "Okay, Giovanna, relax. It's okay," and everything. So I could ease back to reality and to a more relaxed.
We're actually at the end of our episode, and in every episode, PJ and I try out an exercise or some advice that might help us, but also our listeners, to maintain their well-being and their health.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you use some breathing technique to calm you down. Can you maybe help us as well to experience such an exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think breathing helped me a lot, because it really shifts your mind from everything you're thinking about to actually your breath. And I started doing a yoga during that period, and I found this exercise as in one of the yoga videos online. That was the alternate nostril breathing. So you should use two fingers of your right hand. And it's usually the thumb or the middle or ring finger. And then, so you sit up straight with your back straight. And then we can do a couple of breaths in and out, just to relax a bit. In and out. And then with your ring or middle finger, you put it on your left nostril. And you inhale through your right nostril. When you reach the top, you stop and then invert. So you put your thumb on your right nostril and you free your left nostril. And you exhale through your left nostril. Then you inhale through your left nostril. And at the top, you switch. So you exhale through your right nostril. Inhale through your right nostril.
Yeah, this is actually like a very funny image if the listeners would be here in the studio. But
we can continue. So inhale through right nostril at the top, switch your finger. Exhale through left nostril. Inhale through left nostril. Switch at the top.
Okay.
And I'll let you continue for a while.
And how long do you normally do this then?
Just for a couple of minutes.
And how does this help you? Does it help you to clear your mind, or just to get control of because I often have these heart beatings, what you talked about earlier. Does this help you control them, or?
Well, indeed, it helps him two ways, I think. On one hand, it's because when I have anxiety attack, I often forget to breathe. So the difficulty in breathing is one of the symptoms that I missed to mention earlier. And so this also helps getting back into really breathing deeply and getting air in your lungs. And on the other hand, also this routine, let's say, where you really think about what you have to do and how you have to breathe. It really helps to get your mind in the moment rather than on everything else you're thinking. So I think for me, it really helped for both things.
Yeah, I can completely agree, because sometimes you're so busy and everything's just like flashing by, and then it's good to say, oh, stop and just breathe for a second. And it really helps you to get your feet on the ground.
To relax a bit,
and it's easy exercise to do in your office. It doesn't take much time, space, or effort. So that's
But I would really suggest you go and see it online. I'm not that good of a teacher in this.
And do you have some specific recommendations which people can look up?
Well, for me, I really found very nice the videos from Yoga with Adrian on YouTube.
Yes,
they're
I know them,
quite free. They're free, and they're yoga exercises for everything. And there was these yoga for anxiety and stress that I really felt that helped me in those moments. And in many of these, she does this breathing exercise, so I would highly recommend it.
Okay, so I think this actually brings us to the end of the podcast, and we would like to thank you so much for sharing your story here today. We had some very interesting topics we discussed, and very relatable, I think, for PhD students. So thank you very much for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you for having me. I find it very important to be able to share it and raise awareness so that people can maybe start talking more about it.
Yeah, like you said, it shouldn't have to be a taboo.
Yeah, indeed, exactly. So I hope it will help.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Mental Health Matters. We hope you got inspired by these stories on how to keep young researchers in a good mental shape.
Our guest in the next episode is Jack. He will tell us about signals that could lead to burnout and how the pandemic affected his work-life balance.
If you want to know more about these topics and KU Leuven Healthy, visit kuleuven.be/healthy. This podcast is brought to you by KU Leuven Healthy and produced by Chase Creative.